He didn't flinch. That's what stunned the crowd first. As the lights hit the ring and the cameras snapped like lightning, Mike Tyson, once the most feared man in boxing, stood across from a fighter with everything to prove and absolutely no fear in his eyes. Jaron Ennis, decades apart in era, born of different wars, forged in opposite corners of boxing history. Yet somehow, destiny found a way to lock them in the same ring. One a living legend with a legacy drenched in violence and redemption, the other a rising star with footwork like silk and punches sharp enough to slice through myths. It was never supposed to happen, until it did. The whispers had started as fantasy, the kind of barbershop chatter that dies by sundown. But then videos surfaced. Sparring clips, training camps, coaches dropping cryptic hints, and in the dark corners of the boxing world, the question grew louder. What if Tyson fought Ennis? Not just in theory, but for real. A collision of generations. Power versus precision. Explosive rage against calculated aggression. Mike Tyson wasn't just a boxer. He was a storm in human form. But Jaron Ennis? He was something new, slippery, unpredictable, a hybrid. The type of fighter that didn't just read the rulebook. He rewrote it in real time. People asked if it was even fair. Tyson, once a heavyweight king, facing a welterweight phenom. But this wasn't about weight. This was about aura. About two men with raw instincts that defied logic. Tyson's fists were thunderbolts in the 80s and 90s, while Ennis carved his own legend in an era obsessed with movement and control. And in this universe, this alternate boxing timeline, anything was possible. That's what made it so addictive. This wasn't a fantasy anymore. This was unfolding moment by moment, and the world couldn't look away. Behind the scenes, both camps moved in silence. Tyson, older but sharper than anyone expected, seemed to find a spark that hadn't burned this hot in years. No exhibition. No charity rounds. This was a fight. And for Ennis, this was the proving ground. The one that could catapult him from rising star to immortal name. No longer just the next big thing. No longer in anyone's shadow. But could he handle the heat Tyson still carried? Could he read punches thrown with the force of history behind them? They met in the center of the ring, neither blinking, neither backing down. One built his legend in 3-round demolitions. The other carved his path through surgical precision and ruthless control. Now, with the crowd hushed and the first bell seconds away, the ring wasn't just canvas and ropes. It was the edge of a cliff. Because the real question wasn't who'd win. It was whether either of them would leave the same. If they left at all. The first punch didn't just land. It echoed. Not in the way you'd expect from gloves meeting flesh, but in the silence that followed, like everyone forgot how to breathe. Tyson had thrown it with his signature torque, but Ennis didn't crumble. He slipped just enough for the glove to graze his jaw, then returned fire with a lightning-fast counter that drew a sharp gasp from the front row. This wasn't a test anymore. This was a storm colliding with a laser beam, and neither man gave an inch. Tyson's eyes lit up, not with rage, but recognition. This wasn't a walkover, and somewhere deep inside, that thrilled him. Ennis wasn't just surviving. He was calculating, adapting, weaving through danger like he was born inside it. Tyson had faced giants, champions, brawlers. But this was different. Jaron was dissecting him in real time. Every movement Tyson made was met with a response that felt unnervingly timed. But then, just as Ennis started finding rhythm, Tyson changed. No longer the relentless forward march destroyer, he began to slow, feint, throw half punches that made no sense. It was off-pattern, messy, and somehow more dangerous. Like a veteran throwing sand in a chess match. Then came the twist, barely noticeable to most, but undeniable to those who knew what they were watching. Tyson smiled after missing a hook, a half-second too long. Not arrogance. Something else. Ennis hesitated, just for a moment. And that's when it hit. Tyson wasn't trying to win by brute force. He was baiting a trap. Luring Ennis into overcommitting, into trusting the rhythm. And just like that, Ennis felt it. The shift. Tyson wasn't fading. He was evolving. At nearly 60, the man was fighting like he had learned to weaponize unpredictability itself. Commentators scrambled to make sense of what they were witnessing. One called it vintage deception. Another said it was madness disguised as genius. But inside the ropes, it was something purer. Instinct against intellect, the raw and the refined clashing in a game no one thought either could play this well. Every round blurred into the next, and what started as spectacle had become something else entirely. Neither man was supposed to be this dangerous at this point. Tyson was supposed to slow down. Ennis was supposed to dominate with youth and angles. But boxing never follows the script. Outside the ring, trainers barked instructions that were lost to the noise, while behind the scenes, networks were already discussing rematch clauses and historic implications. But inside, all that mattered was the next exchange. And with the crowd leaning forward in unison, Ennis stepped in with a triple jab, a signature move meant to set up the right hand, and Tyson didn't flinch. He didn't move at all. That moment of stillness, of calculated pause, was more chilling than any punch he could thrown. Because in that heartbeat of silence, it became clear. Tyson had seen something. Something no one else had. And just like that, everything changed again. A flicker of something unspoken passed through Ennis' eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or the dawning realization that he was no longer dancing with a relic of the past. Tyson had stopped chasing him, stopped lunging with reckless abandon. Instead, he stood calm, reading every move like a man who'd seen it all before. For the first time in the fight, Ennis didn't strike. He paused, and in that razor-thin pause, Tyson pounced. A short right to the body, followed by a left uppercut that grazed Ennis' guard, then a pivot, smooth as ever, creating an angle that no one saw coming. The punch that followed wasn't the hardest of the fight, but it was the smartest. A looping left hand, thrown at just the right delay, clipped Ennis' temple and forced him into a stumble that sent shockwaves through the arena. The crowd rose like a wave breaking at once. This was the moment. Every camera locked in. Every voice melted into a roar. Ennis, dazed but not broken, steadied himself, blinking fast, recalibrating. He'd never been hit quite like that. Not with raw power, but with timing that whispered of decades inside the squared circle. But what Tyson didn't expect, what no one expected, was what Ennis did next. He didn't retreat. He stepped in. With a flurry so precise it looked choreographed, Ennis let loose. A low body shot, then a snap jab to reassert range, and finally, a step-through right hand that cracked through Tyson's defense and snapped his head back. The punch was clean. It was defiant. It was a statement, but Tyson didn't fall. He laughed. A dry, tired laugh that somehow still carried the weight of wars won and battles lost. He nodded once, almost out of respect, and for the first time, both men backed off, circling. The crowd, unsure whether to scream or stay silent, watched with reverence. Seconds left in the round. One more exchange. Ennis threw a jab, and Tyson, instead of countering, raised his glove and tapped his chest twice. Then he turned his shoulders slightly and, with a veteran's rhythm, stepped aside, signaling something invisible. The bell rang. The crowd roared again, not because the round had ended, but because they knew. The fight was over. The decision went to the judges. But by then, it didn't matter. Ennis had proven he could walk through fire and not just survive, but grow stronger in it. Tyson, though decades removed from his prime, had shown that legacy wasn't built on knockouts alone. It was built on moments like this. Mutual recognition. Warrior to warrior. And just when the camera zoomed in on the center of the ring, ready to capture the split decision announcement, the twist came, not from the judges, but from Ennis himself. He raised Tyson's hand. It wasn't about winning. It was about witnessing two eras collide and finding respect in the rubble. The final scorecards were irrelevant. The real story was carved into the silence after, when both men exited the ring side by side, not as opponents, but as proof that greatness doesn't fade, it just evolves.